All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. All right, Kelli, here we go. So 5,
Awesome.
4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have back Dr. Kelli Palfy. Kelli, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So Kelli began a professional career working in adult and youth corrections. Here she noticed a disproportionate number of males in the system. In 1996, she became an RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police Officer. She took an interest in investigating sex crimes and went on to specialize in sex crimes committed against children internationally. Here, as she combed through video evidence, she witnessed firsthand the grooming tactics commonly used by sophisticated pedophiles. Mm-hmm. After retiring from the RCMP, Dr. Palfy obtained her Ph.D. in counseling from the University of Alberta. She conducted her doctoral research on the reasons why males don't commonly disclose sexual abuse. She's now a trained trauma therapist and public speaker on the topic of male sexual abuse. And your book, as we can see in the background, is Men Too, correct? Unspoken Truths about male sexual abuse. All right. Fascinating. Super excited to have you back. Let's get into it. So before like a couple of days ago, you were like, I want to focus on this topic specifically. So what was that topic and why do you want to focus on it?
Well, I would love to just kind of, segue from our last podcast where we kind of touched on, how people are missing this and maybe why they're missing it. And specifically why one of the reasons why boys and men don't disclose sexual abuse, which is the grooming process that they often go through. It leaves them confused. Confused about whether or not they were victims. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Okay. Let's just go back briefly and give us a thumbnail. You said why this is often missed. Give us a thumbnail sketch of why you think it's often missed.
Well, okay, so it's sort of in the way that an offender would target a victim. Like there's two types of offenders. There's a situational type of offender, and then there's a preferential child molester. The situational type of offender, they're indiscriminate. They will offend. Sorry, my puppy. Shush.
I actually can't hear him or her, so just so you know.
Okay, good. So the situational type, I'm going to have to put her out here. Misty, sit.
It's no worries.
Sit. Come on. Sorry. Sorry.
It's fine, Kelli, honestly.
Oh, she's training. So the situational type of offender, they're sexually indiscriminate, which means that they will offend against any gender, any age, any time. Whereas the preferential child molester, they have an age and gender of preference. So these are the ones that I believe are more prolific. We don't know for sure. But the process that they use to gain access to their targets is oftentimes a reason that boys and men are so confused about what has actually happened to them. If that answers your question.
Okay, which is very interesting. So I guess the first thing that comes to my mind, though, the grooming process can take a long time, right? Over the course of months, years, et cetera.
Yes.
And then you're saying once the actual physical abuse occurs, in the wake of that, people are often confused about what has actually happened to them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So open that up for us. Say more about that.
Yes, please. So there's 3 stages to grooming, 3 parts of grooming. The first stage or part of grooming, the offender has to groom himself, him or herself. So he will groom him or herself to look the part, so to speak, to fit into this environment, to fill a void somewhere in society where they can gain access to victims. Now, this sounds crazy, but, I would just invite anybody who's listening to think about anything that you've ever fixated on. Even if it's like, I want to become an an engineer. Okay, you got to go back to school to become an engineer. You got to do that process of getting accredited to get what you want, to get the career that you want. Offenders think about gaining access to their victims in the same way.
Wow.
So yes, it's crazy. So they will go back to school, they'll volunteer, they will do anything to put themselves in a target-rich environment and anything to make themselves look like the least likely person you'd ever suspect would ever offend. This includes they will become pastors, they will become youth leaders, they will become police officers, they will become coaches. In fact, athletics is one of their favorite stomping grounds, right? So yes, they will do anything. So that's the first stage of grooming. They groom themselves to be present in that target-rich environment, which, by the way, for the preferential offender includes access to their age and gender of preference. So if their age and gender of preference is 12 to 13-year-old girls, they will become a girls' volleyball coach for that age group.
Now, this might seem like an obvious question, but is this process of self-grooming, is this a conscious process?
Oh, yes.
It is.
Yes.
Okay. Now, just as an aside here, it's been said that certain acts of sexual assault, for example, rape, is not an actual sexual act. It's more of a violent act. Is that the same thing here?
Well, I mean, yes, I would agree that that's sometimes the case. However, I believe the preferential child molester, they do get sexual gratification they sexually desire children. And saying that, their acts aren't necessarily violent, which is also part of what it confuses boys and men, right? Because they will sort of portray it in a seductive way, like they've seduced the boy and they kind of fell into the relationship.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So,
and then it just sort of happened,
Right,
that's the way they present it.
So you went through the first stage of the grooming process.
Second stage would be to groom the other people in their victim target-rich environment, like in that environment. So they will groom the parents, like through establishing relationships with the parents. They'll show up at your house for dinner. They'll, just become active members of the community so that people see them and again let their guard down, right? So they will, examples in my book, the priest would come over to his secretary's house for dinner all the time, and she had 6 kids, I think it was. So he noticed the boy that was not getting attention and started giving him attention, and the family just thought, this is awesome, he's getting the attention he needs. So they will fill a void. They will, so stage 1, they groom themselves. Stage 2, they groom, or section 2, whatever you want to call it, of grooming. They groom the people in the environment. And then the third part of it, they groom the child. So they win the parents' trust and loyalty, and then they win the child's trust and loyalty. So during the next stage, they're going to be lavishing the child with attention, possibly gifts, certainly opportunities, including opportunities to be alone. So in the athletic scene, for example, they will offer to coach a kid who has potential. And I mean, they would pick the kid that actually has potential and develop that child. Maybe run them through athletic exercises that are going to help build their, endurance or their strength or whatever it is they need to do. Offer to ice them, massage their sore muscles, get them in front of the people that they might want to be in front of, that kind of thing. Give them good recommendations. Definitely going to have opportunity, though, to be alone with them, and also to sort of get them used to maybe non-sexual touch. So that could start by massaging their sore muscles after they've put them through a ridiculously rigorous workout.
Right. So it seems like the gap, if you will, between the non-sexual touch and the sexual touch becomes very small in a sense. Who are the individuals that are doing this?
The offenders?
Yes. I mean, I'm asking you to generalize, but...
Well, I mean, the sad thing is they look just like you and I. You can't tell what an offender looks like. The only difference between them and you and I is that they have a sexual preference for children.
Well, I guess my question is, right, I wasn't intimating, do they have blue noses or red ears?
Wouldn't that be easy?
Where is that coming from?
I mean, we don't know the cause of this,
Okay.
right? Like, I see it as demonic, honestly. I'm not sure. I can't answer that question. I wish I could. And then we could just push the easy button. But I mean, I honestly don't know.
So have majority of them been abused?
Well, and that's a tough question. There is research that Dr. Sana Alter discusses in her book. I think I showed you that book on our last podcast, where she says, like, a lot of the prolific sex offenders that she interviewed in the prison system, the psychopathic ones, in the beginning, 80% of them were saying that they were abused. However, when you simply threaten them with the polygraph, not even giving it to them, just threatening the polygraph, that number dropped to 30%. So we don't actually know how many were abused, but most of them claim that they were abused, which is also one of the reasons that a lot of the victims don't come forward, because they don't want everybody in society to think that they're going to turn out to be pedophiles if they were abused. So it's this yucky, nasty, vicious cycle. Yeah.
How do we categorize this behavior? You said demonic. Is it deviant to the nth degree? I mean, it's obviously abuse. It's kind of horrific. Does it make sense that psychologically there would be something that is
Well, I would say that healthy, well people don't have sexual attraction to children. So,
right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just seems to me, I realize there's not an easy answer for this, but it seems to me that there should be an answer.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah.
Well, and even if it would be, people who, I would be curious about the attachment issues and so forth. If any research has been done into the kind of etiology of this?
I can't answer that. That's not offenders are not necessarily my specialty, right? Like, I specialize in working with the victims and why they don't report. So, all I can say is that there's definitely something's not right.
Right.
The etiology of it. Again, you're talking about psychopathic sex offenders here in one regard, and we know that we can't trust what they say. So even if there was research, is it accurate, right?
Right. I mean, to hear you say that there's so many reasons why people aren't reporting this. What have you discovered? What have you found out about the victims, in a sense?
Well, I mean, again, just to kind of go back to what we were originally talking about, this whole grooming process, right? Like, one of the reasons that boys and men are not disclosing is the profound levels of confusion that some of them have, right? So, like we mentioned in the beginning, an offender will spend weeks, months, even years building a relationship, and they're not just doing it with one person. They might have multiple targets at different stages of the grooming process that they're working towards. So they will spend weeks, months, years befriending establishing themselves, befriending the family, befriending the victim, winning the victim's trust, building what the victim feels is an authentic relationship, whereas the offender is doing it out of deception, right? So building this relationship so the victim actually genuinely likes their offender.
Right.
So yeah, one of the reasons, if it is like this type of abuse, is because they feel guilty about having liked their offender prior to the abuse. And then, of course, the offender will do things like say, hey, we're both going to be in trouble for this. One of the things that offenders often do is they will allow the victim to do things that, for example, their parents won't let them do. So drive a vehicle, smoke cigarettes, drink a beer, view sexually explicit material, swear, all of those things. And when they do these things, they will reward them for those behaviors that their parents wouldn't approve of. And then in doing so, they're also testing their victim's loyalty. So
Jesus.
I know.
The detail.
I know. Wow. It's all in my book. If it's like way more detail in my book. This is what my book is about. It's meant to help male victims understand why they don't want to talk about it and how they got into this situation. So yes. So the offender will test their loyalties by allowing them to do these things, because in the offender's mind, he's saying, well, it's better to be in trouble for letting this guy smoke a cigarette or watch a porn movie or drive a vehicle than to be found out for having abused him. So they literally test their victims oftentimes first. They let them do things. And then when the victim, after a few weeks or whatever, if the victim doesn't tell and they're not in trouble, then they'll move forward. Again, they're doing all of this, kind of simultaneously, right? They're getting the victim used to this non-sexual touch. They might start even slower, like with a young child, they might tickle them in front of their parents so that the victim sees that their parents see them touching them and say that it's okay. Or they'll get older kids to wrestle with each other and then eventually have them take their shirts off and then, maybe even join in or teach them how to subdue each other. Any of these kinds of things where they get the child used to being touched and then rewarding them for engaging in these masculine principles. And then somehow they introduce, some sort of sexual content into it, whether it's, introducing pornography or asking them what they know about sex. One of the boys that I profiled in my book, his offender started teasing him about his girlfriend and asking him what he knew about masturbation, gave him some pornography to look at, and he actually had a peephole in the boy's cabin, so he knew when he was masturbating, then just happened to open the door at the right exact time. The boy tried to cover himself, tried to stop, was stopping and stuff, but he's like, don't be embarrassed, this is what guys do. So that kind of behavior, and then of course takes him home 3 days later, shakes his dad's hand, tells him, they had a wonderful time, and that's it. And using the boy's erection against him, as evidence. Look, you enjoyed this too, that kind of thing. So it's all meant to leave the victim confused.
Oh my God.
I know.
Your book is it a compilation of different profiles?
Yes, I interviewed 13 different male victims about their experience of having been abused, and my specific questions were, why didn't you disclose this sooner? So, yeah, and some of these boys were actually offended against by their own biological parents, which is almost unfathomable, but yet so many in my research were.
Just out of curiosity, how did you find these individuals?
I went to a conference where they gathered, so I just threw up a poster at I'd been to this conference a few times for training myself, and then I just decided, because it was a conference that mixed psychologists and victims, which is really rare, I know, but anyways, I went and I just threw up a poster and said, hey, if you want to talk about why you didn't talk about it, come talk to me, and 14 men did.
Wow. Is there a point at which some of the people you profiled did report it and or get help?
Yeah, every one of them was at this conference, so every one of them had already disclosed to someone else. But my criteria was that they had to have waited at least 1 year. And so one of the guys I had to exclude because he hadn't waited a year. He went and told somebody right away. But it's unfortunate because he was shut down by the person he told. He went and told one of his guy friends that his ex had let herself into their former mutual house, and he woke up and she was having sex with him. And his friends laughed and said score, whereas he wasn't taking it as a score. It was a violation, right? He was upset about this, like he didn't want to be with her.
Kelli, this sounds like such a dire situation. I mean, how... I when I think of this podcast, it's trauma is just in and of itself across the spectrum is so crazy. This seems particularly insidious and horrific.
It is.
What are your thoughts after writing this book? Where do you sit with all this? What are the questions you have?
I mean, where do I sit with this? I guess, I have a frustration because people still don't want to hear about it. They still don't want to talk about it. They still don't want to believe it's happening in their backyard. I mean, it's frustrating on some levels, and it's sad because, these boys and men are not getting the support they need. They're not even getting recognized as victims, right? Like, for example, you get a boy who's been abused at home, and then he starts, not being able to pay attention in school because all he can think about is what happened at home or what happened with his cousin. And then all of a sudden he's being labeled as learning disabled or a bad student or, being bullied because he's not paying attention or because he's, getting teased. And it can just be such a yucky, slippery slope, right? And so these boys, we're missing them in elementary school, that this is part of what's happened to them. And, if they've bought into the societal message that existed in your and my generation, which was that boys aren't allowed to have any feeling other than anger, and boys always want sex, that kind of stuff. Boys can always defend themselves. These little boys are just so confused that they often do stay quiet. They start to isolate or they act out, right? Because they're angry and rightfully angry. So it's crazy.
In your opinion, what do we need to do as a culture? How do we do it? I mean,
we need to educate ourselves. We need to be aware. Like that is exactly what my whole book is about, honestly, Guy. Not just to make a pitch from my book, but I got lots of free podcasts.
Well, that's why you're here, right? We're talking about your book. Yeah. So
and I mean, that's my whole point, is that we need to be aware of this. Read my book. There's no really graphic stuff in my book. Like, I do reference one tiny bit of sexual abuse in my book, but it's just meant to educate people about what's really going on, like how we're missing this.
How we're missing this, and how are we missing this?
Again, missing that the boy who's all of a sudden had this drastic change in character, going from being, the good boy who goes to church with his grandma and grandpa to smoking drugs and dark poetry and being promiscuous, that it's not just because he became a teenager, somebody introduced him to something, and that not everybody that starts out good stays good, that kind of thing, that, churches are terrible for missing this. For example, I always, like to talk about how offenders will infiltrate these organizations that have, pure and honest goals, right? But then, they might pick on the kid, for example, who's already got a history of lying, and then offend against him because they know nobody's going to believe him anyway, right?
Right.
Yeah, just being aware of their tactics. I honestly think the biggest thing we need to do is be aware of the offender's techniques. Then we can smell it.
Well, I mean, I think you just laying out these three different grooming stages was really helpful and interesting and eye-opening for myself, certainly, and I'm sure for our listeners, thinking about the revelations that came to light through the women's gymnastic team and the abuse there. And then, of course, with Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
With Jeffrey Epstein, that seems to be, there was this whole, obviously, grooming process going on as well there.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that we need to see is how connected those people were, right? Like, they work together. And this is what we were seeing back when I was a police lady. For example, we would seize our target offender's computer and we would send it off to tech crimes to be analyzed. And they would say, hey, here's 300 more addresses of other pedophiles that they've been trading images with. And we would just say, thank you very much. We do not have the capacity to investigate that, which is terrible. And, some of the bigger agencies in Canada have been told to not investigate these things anymore because the court system can't handle it. That's where we're at. These guys are getting away with it. And with the computers now, they're so connected. It's easy for them to be connected.
Are we seeing as a culture, as a global culture, are we seeing more and more of this? Or are we becoming at least a little more aware that this is going on?
Well, I mean, you probably hear the buzzwords human trafficking everywhere, right? I mean, human trafficking involves adults being trafficked for employment purposes too. But they say that human trafficking is the largest industry in the world, the most lucrative. Isn't that insane? I mean, insane. Right? I think there is a lot more going on. I mean, and I think it is getting more prolific because they're more openly recruiting, say, young girls to recruit young girls, or young girls to recruit young boys in high schools where I don't know, it's like, I kind of look at it like, anything goes on TV anymore. You can watch a movie on how to commit a murder and get away with it, right? Like, we have made evil we've romanticized it and made it so exciting and acceptable that kids are not knowing that in our minds, this is fiction, right? In their minds, it's reality.
So as we kind of get ready to close down here, the people listening to this obviously are therapists, coaches, survivors, and combinations thereof. What do they need to hear? What do they need to know and be aware of?
Well, I would say if you're working with a man, like, be aware of the reasons that boys and men don't disclose, and be aware that some of the reasons that they're coming to you for help, for example, if they're struggling with anger issues, or if they're in marital therapy, and, for example, the man is being accused of being emotionally avoidant. Consider sexual abuse, because anybody who's got a secret that they don't want to disclose become avoidant of any intimacy out of fear that they might accidentally disclose, right? So so if you've got a man who's engaging in, like, distraction techniques, for example, becoming a workaholic or an alcoholic, right? They could be doing these things to keep so busy that they don't think about their abuse. Avoidance of intimacy in a relationship, sexual promiscuity, they're cheating on their spouses when they're not open to that, right? This could be because, what happens oftentimes, if a boy is abused by a man, he wants to go out and prove his masculinity to himself and to the world. So he hooks up with this woman who's initially very complimentary, very, fills that void for him. But then as the relationship matures and, they just get on with regular life, and she stops throwing out all those compliments, just because they get into a comfort zone and that sort of honeymoon phase wears off, he still needs that void filled. He still needs to hear that he's the stud muffin he always was. He still needs to hear that he's a real man. So he may be going out and finding other women that are willing to tell him that.
When you were writing the book, or as you were writing the book, were there some things that surprised you?
Yeah, and I often say one of the reasons that surprised me, well, two things that surprised me was the trauma response, the body's ability for a trauma victim to actually bury it. That I didn't know, because I was taught, when I was a police lady, we were taught that repressed memories, we just stay away from them. Now I understand that it's the body's extreme response to trauma. So that was good for me to learn. And then one of the other reasons that surprised me was how many of these boys were not disclosing their sexual abuse to protect their families, whether it was to protect their parents' reputation, or to protect their parents from information they thought would be too hard to handle, or because they didn't think their parents had the capacity to handle it. And I talk all about that in my book.
So
that
these
surprised
were in
me.
Instances where the parents weren't the perpetrators.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Like, one of the boys in my book, his name's Ricky. His mom had MS, and his dad was very focused on tending to his mom, which he needed to be. She was in a wheelchair. He was being abused by his neighbor. He was being abused by a cousin. But he said, I couldn't tell my dad, in part because he had too much on his plate. But also because his dad had really, strict views about homosexuality, and because Ricky was confused about whether or not he was a willing participant, or because he'd let the abuse go on too long, because his abuser was giving him attention, which he needed. So he was therefore confused about his own degree of willingness in the situation. So yeah, it's really, I said, like, the reasons that boys and men do not report are multifaceted and across their entire lifetimes, depending on when their abuse happened and their stage of development and their understanding. So it's really complex for boys.
It seems, it seems so almost hopeless. I don't want to use that word, but this topic is so horrific. People don't want to talk about this.
You're right. You're right. Honestly, I thought I'd be retired by now. I probably sell 15 books a month. Like, I'm ashamed to admit that because I thought I was going to be the next Brene Brown, that everybody would be all over my book. Nobody wants to talk about it. The people that buy my book are often the male victims, and I get the most heartfelt thank you emails and letters from people.
God.
One of them sent them through a prison guard, especially in the inmates in jail that have been sexually abused. They are like, one of them said, "It's like you've been following me around my whole life. Like you nailed everything that happened to me. Like you explained everything." Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, like once a month I get like the most beautiful, long, heartfelt email from psychologists or male survivors, or just someone who, like, I had one gal, her brother had disclosed to her. She went out and bought 5 copies of my book, and we did a family meeting intervention, whatever you want to say.
Oh my gosh.
And it was interesting because at the end of it, the dad reached out to me, and even though we'd gone through this whole disclosure supporting his son, he still didn't disclose to his family that he'd been abused. It was crazy.
Oh my gosh.
It's so prolific. It is so predominant.
Do you find that therapists as a cohort also don't even want to talk about this?
Well, I don't know that they don't want to talk about it, but they miss it, right? Like, when I did my dissertation, and I'm sorry, I'm going to brag for a sec, but when I did my dissertation, one of my supervisors, he said, "Kelli, I learned so much from you." He said, like, it wasn't even healthy, but I couldn't put it down. He said, "I read it all in one night." And I was like, that's 188 pages. And like, other professors from U of A were telling me, like, you are making me rethink all of my stuck male victims, you know? So when you keep in mind that some of these boys and men actually did block the memories of their abuse, plus they don't want to disclose, depending on how they expect to be treated.
Mm-hmm. This issue, this topic of blocking the abuse, is that essentially what repression is?
Yes.
Okay.
Repressed memories, yeah.
Yeah.
It also could be manifest as dissociative identity disorder as well, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The name of the book is Men Too: Unspoken Truth About Male Sexual Abuse. We'll have links up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Kelli, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
KelliPalfy.com.
Very simple. And people can get the book there too?
Or on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Chapters.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, it's inspiring that you are doing this. I mean, that you're out there doing this work. We need someone like, we do. We need someone like you who's courageous enough. Come on.
Thank you.
This is crazy.
Oh, thank you, Guy. Hey, can I show you one more thing that we've done? I'm sorry, I just got to leave the camera for 1 sec.
Okay.
Myself and a colleague have created a children's book series, which is not on my website yet, but will be soon, but it is on Amazon. It's meant for parents it's called the Creating Personal Safety series. This particular book is called The Unsafe Neighbor, and it's meant to help parents have those awkward but very necessary conversations about grooming, about how someone who we think is safe, who starts out as safe, can turn out to be not safe at all. And it's pretty vanilla. It's not completely vanilla, but it's pretty vanilla. It's not meant to traumatize, but just to educate. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
Well, send me that link. Where can that be also purchased on Amazon?
Yes, it's on Amazon. Yeah. And I'm going to put it on my website very soon.
All right. We'll have that linked up also. Okay. Kelli, thank you so much. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I want to thank you so much for listening to this podcast, and I want to let you know that I am very excited about my new podcast, The Right Now Project. The Right Now Project is about healing. It's about stepping into our own courage and authenticity and getting started or continuing along our healing process. We're all going through something, whatever it is, in this crazy life we're living. And the Right Now Project is about honoring that, celebrating that, and sharing our stories via the associated membership site. Check us out at therightnowproject.com, therightnowproject.com.